Are you curious about bodies, pleasure, and possibilities? And what about curious about what others are up to on the planet when it comes to pleasure, sex, and play? Have you considered what pleasure can do for your life, your body, and your bank account? Do you know something magical, delightful, and out-of-this-world orgasmic is not only possible for you, but totally available to you? If you're ready to be the magical, sexual, sexy beast you know you can be, and you just need the tools to get there, you're in the right place. Now, here's the host of The Pleasure Zone, sensual movement artist, relationship and sex alchemist, Milica Jelenic.
Welcome, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. We are on The Pleasure Zone tonight, and we are talking about the many levels of exhibitionism. Doesn't that just sound both delightful and for some of you frightful? And that's cool. I just wondered, do you ever get turned on by even just the thought of doing something like exposing yourself publicly, masturbating publicly? Do you fantasize about that? Do you think about it? Do you want to actually follow through on it? Have you ever done it? And do you get turned on by doing things like sexual acts in public or even just fantasizing about it? Well, that's kind of what we're talking about today. And my question on this when I first put this show out, because I don't know if you are avid listeners, what you'll notice is that I've done a show on voyeurism and exhibitionism a couple of years ago. And so I just thought, oh, maybe I'll just dedicate a whole show to exhibitionism, and then next week's show I'll dedicate to voyeurism. And so this entire show dedicated to exhibitionism came down to the question of why is it illegal, and why is showing off our bodies illegal? And the other question to me is what has us desire doing that and choosing that? So those are my main questions that I'm going to be reflecting on tonight. And believe it or not, Google failed me today. Google, you failed me. Google's fail today was that there is not a lot of information about, well, not just Google, but in terms of psychology and evaluations of people's behavior, behavioral sciences in general, don't have any conclusive information about why would somebody choose to be an exhibitionist? Why, oh, why would some ludicrous person want to masturbate in public and get totally turned on by that? Crazy people like myself. And why is that? Like, so some of the articles that I came across that discussed exhibitionism really were just discussing it as a paraphilia. So paraphilia is, for those of you out there who are not avid listeners, might not know what a paraphilia is. The gist of a paraphilia is it's like sexual tendencies and preferences outside what we might call the norm. So sex in public is considered outside the norm. Sex in your bed in a missionary position is considered norm. And pretty much probably anybody who's a little curious or even does a little like spanking in the bedroom, guess what? You're opening the door to paraphilia play. So no worries, because you're actually curious. So isn't that quite funny? Just like, what? How do we all get to be freaks? Well, we are all freaks, because I think the person who created those rules, maybe they were not creative, maybe didn't have a lot of lovers in their life, self-loathing, loathed other people, so they just wanted to make as many definitions to limit people's sexual normalcy as possible, and everything outside of that is a deviance or a paraphilia. So there we go. That is my evaluation of why things have been considered paraphilias, is somebody decided that one day. Anyway, what we're talking about today with exhibitionism is, to me, I want to look at the journey of from childhood to even if it is childhood where we start to have the desire for exhibitionism, all the way through adulthood. So from the innocent to the illegal is where we're going today. And from those innocent acts of maybe you're a child, maybe you're even an adult, but let's start with childhood. Say you're a child and you just really love being naked. You enjoy your body and you just enjoy the feeling of being naked, and you don't really even have a concept of what is socially normal to put on clothing in public, so you don't. Now, I have a little niece, and we have bets about her, about when she comes over. She's 3 now, and when she comes over, we have bets. How long will it take her to take her clothes off? And the last time she was over, I said 3 minutes, and I was wrong. She was stripping in the car before she even got out. And that's the kind of girl she is. And we just don't make her wrong for it. So somewhere in the world, there are people making other people wrong for their nudity. Well, when you make somebody wrong for anything that is really just an innocent act, what does that do to them? Let's just think about that. Let's break it down to another way of looking at it, because we're looking at nudity and we tend to sexualize bodies, even if people sexualize children's bodies and say, that's wrong, put your clothes on. Why? Because some adult feels sexually attracted to you. That's probably why they're asking you to put the clothes on, because they're uncomfortable with their own thoughts and need some help. So that's my thought on that. But if we look at it as you're doing something that's an average everyday act, something that's natural, eating, for example. And if you're eating and somebody makes you feel wrong for your choices or for what you're doing or how you're eating, then that wrongness that's been put on you will turn into a different energy. It could lend you to having eating disorders. It could lend you to having more like a finicky eating or a desire not to eat. So any of those kind of spectrums of eating disorders probably start to occur if a person's been, wronged most of their life for what they're eating. Now, if a person's, and then what occurs? They have an eating disorder for life. Overeating, undereating, no eating, vomiting, all of it, right? They will find a way to deal with the wrongness that they think is them. Now, if a person is wronged for nudity as a child, what occurs? Maybe what occurs is they still have the desire to be naked in public. That festers and boils and sits inside of them. And at some point in their life, they become older and they have this burning desire to experience that freedom of nudity. So what do? Something totally illegal, which would be like showing off their genitals in public. Now, part of the difference with some definitions of exhibitionism is that there is a secondary part to the definition. So the first part of the definition is like exposure of your body, could be exposure of your body parts that normally aren't seen in public, right? So if we look at North American society, the parts that normally aren't seen in public are what we call the bathing suit parts, which are like your breasts, your bum, your genitals, right? Although now, there are G-string bathing suits that show off the butt cheeks all the time. Those are the parts that we would consider, if they were showing, would be considered exhibitionism. Now, in other parts of the world where you might be in a tribe where nudity is totally normal, does exhibitionism exist? So my question was when did these rules start? And Wikipedia couldn't help me. Google didn't help me. So if any of you out there know this, my evaluation of it started with colonialism. That's my evaluation. And maybe in future I'll bring on a friend of mine who's a PhD expert in colonialism, and she can discuss how different things about colonialism affect different things in our lives. So perhaps I'll be able to get her on to talk about that. But even in discussions with her, I do realize the impact of colonialism. So I'm thinking, what occurs? So we have a society, the British, for example, who have gone, there are colonial for other things, not just the Brits as well. There are Portuguese and Spanish and French, all kinds of countries that were colonialists. But we're going to talk about I'll just use the British as an example because, trying to take over the world is pretty big was pretty big on their agenda for a while. So when you look at their values at the time when they started going into different countries, even though at times in England there was sort of a freedom of sexual expression, and I mean in France there was always probably more than has ever been than there was in England, but there were some times in England where it was okay. However, there wasn't a lot of times in England where nudity was seen as a decent act. It was generally considered indecent exposure, and how and why that occurred, it can only be something, I would say, to the values of the people through generations. If you look at, even historically, when you look at different countries like invading countries, say the Romans, say the Romans going to England, they had created all of their Roman baths in England. And what occurred in Roman baths? Nudity. So it wasn't the Roman values that were brought to England. Was it the Viking values? Was it where did these values come from? How did they get established? When and what ruler, king or queen, decided that nudity was wrong? And in whatever it was that had them decide that, it was probably a ruler, and I don't have total proof of who it was, but my tracking back in history energetically right now is it was probably some ruler who had some kind of either religious affiliation that was really strong, that was saying that nudity is indecent because of Adam and Eve. There might have been some kind of so there may be a religious affiliation that goes to royalty that creates some rules that says you can't be nude. But then maybe there was also a component of the person choosing that truth, so-called truth from the Bible, we'll just call it the so-called truth, and using that because maybe they had a lot of self-loathing going on and they didn't want to be naked. So how much was it for their own personal advantage? Well, whatever it was, that value system definitely carried through to many countries that were further colonialized. So even if you look at for example, let's even look at, I live in Canada. Let's look at Canada and look at the people who are the indigenous people who would have worn different skins and things in the summer, probably, showing off more of their body than certainly the Europeans were used to seeing. So then, bringing religion into the picture again, making them wrong for that, and then convincing them that something bad and terrible and evil is going to happen. So exhibitionism as being something that is wrong, like showing off your body publicly as something that's wrong, is definitely a value system that isn't it's not necessarily a universal value system. So creating a law or laws based on something that doesn't really have a universal value system doesn't make a lot of freaking sense to me. But then again, I don't run the government and I don't make rules, because if I did, we'd have a lot more things that were based on some universal value systems, like kindness to each other. That seems like a good universal value system. However, let's face it, I hope in this lifetime I get to see it, but I doubt that I will. But what would it take? And so I think about, all these, people throughout history and life that have been in trouble for doing things like getting naked publicly, or, and there have been many. There, historically, when you look at all the people who have purposefully gotten naked publicly, they're like Egyptian kings who masturbated in front of crowds, and different rulers, and ancient history, just nudity was their thing. There were nude goddesses that, when you look at different mythological stories, goddesses tended to be nude. Sometimes they showed off their genitals as a show of strength and fertility and all kinds of things. And a lot of actual goddess sculptures that have been found and different images of goddesses throughout, especially throughout Europe, have the image of the goddess who's showing off her vulva quite explicitly and breasts. So if anything, there was some kind of goddess worship that actually involved a reverence and an enjoyment of the genitals and the body, and it was not vulgar. It was quite seen as something divine. So why do we hide the divine? Geez, if we actually allowed the divine to be in our lives and to be something that we can witness and experience daily, wouldn't that be somewhat of a strange and amazing experience? So actually, my friend who's producing me today, her name is Keisha Clark, and she has a show on this station called Aligning Divine. Lots of information about the divine on there. And it is kind of a fun question about why do we hide the divine? And our genitals are essentially and have been considered creation tools, just like God is a creation, and the goddess are, they're creators and creationists, and so are our genitals. So we're hiding the divine, and why is that? It's just a curious question. So I'm actually interested in exploring some other sides of this whole exhibitionism part of the story, because I can sometimes go on about history, and I don't have history memorized. I just like bits and bytes of history, so I don't have dates and this and that for you. I just have the gist of history. And I'd like to look at some other bits of information around exhibitionism and how the heck did this get so wrong? What can we do to invite this to be received, our bodies to be received, naked bodies to be received, less judgment, more fun, more play. And I'm going to give you some fun places that you can look at in the world that you could just take off your clothes. It's totally legal, and you don't even have to be at a nudist beach. So we'll talk about that too. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for The Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Are you a subject matter expert? Are you here to share your expertise with an audience waiting to hear from you in only the way you can deliver? Are you ready to have your voice amplified across the airwaves? Inspired Choices Network has a global radio platform streaming to millions of people across the world. Professionally produced and supported by an accomplished team every step of the way, you can broadcast from anywhere in the world, knowing your voice matters, and we ensure it is delivered with ease and efficiency. Eager to hear your message, the world awaits. Contact us today to become an Inspired Choices Network radio host. Email becomeahost@inspiredchoicesnetwork.com.
This is The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today from the U.S., call 815-880-TALK. That's 815-880-8255. From Canada, dial 613-800-8736. Or you can Skype us at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Or send your questions or comments via email to info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back, the sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're talking about exhibitionism. Seems like a fun topic to talk about. I'm not even sure, why that topic came up. I think I was just looking at fun topics that I haven't talked about in a while. However, it was kind of neat because in mentioning this to a friend of mine today, I said, my topic tonight's about exhibitionism, and the true title is The Many Levels of Exhibitionism, from like the innocent to the illegal, and what qualifies what. So the conversation actually led to, he was telling me that there was a video that I think it had gone viral on YouTube in Berlin. So in Berlin, apparently there is no law against being nude in public. So people choose it. There's no law for it, but there's, I guess, no law against it. So a guy was lying in the park at lunchtime at work, naked, with his laptop or laptop bag beside him, and out of nowhere, out of this like forest, comes a wild boar, runs over, grabs his laptop bag, and takes off and runs away. Now I still have to find this video because I think it's going to be so funny. And I guess he chases after the wild boar. Long and the short of it, he gets it back. But I thought, that is so fun. I mean, it was a fun story because my show is about exhibitionism tonight. And that, the variety of people, I guess, in the middle of Berlin is you could have naked people in the park or not naked people. And if you want to judge one person or not judge anybody, but there's sort of a freedom to choose whatever you would like. And I thought that's pretty cool. I kind of laughed. I thought, what, are people like naked except for their masks? Because, COVID. But, I guess if you social distance, you can be naked without a mask. So, yay! And which made me actually think, where else is it legal to be naked where maybe we don't even know that it's legal to be naked? And so, of course, I went and I searched this out for you guys. And let me find out where I put that information, because I know Munich was on the list. And let me see what else. Okay, so here we go. For those of you who didn't know, there are top 5, or the top 5 places in the world to be allowed to be naked in public are a place called Cap d'Agde in France. It's most famous place in the world as a nudist town, and it's also one of the largest beach resorts that accepts nudism. So that's in France, and they can have a crowd of like 40,000 tourists flock to that beach normally when there's no COVID and no social distancing going on. And it's actually nudism is considered accepted there, and acts that are perceived as sexual are considered illegal. So there are certain locations, I guess, that are reserved for people who would like to practice their fetishes on that beach, but they're done in private. So lots going on at the Cap d'Agde. I know so much, and like so many of you pleasure seekers out there are probably right now Googling, how much does it cost to get to Cap d'Agde? So CAP is the first word, and the next word is D''Agde, just so you can go Google search and get yourself a nice good ticket to go there, get naked, practice some fetishes in the corner in the private zone. How cool is that? I love that. So surprisingly, there are 2 in the U.S. Oregon is one of the states that it's apparently okay to be nude. So it's nudists are only restricted to go nude in certain states, and one of them is Oregon. Specifically in Portland, there is an open nudity law that exists. So in Portland and in Eugene, Oregon, you can be naked whenever you like. Again, as long as you don't have the intent to arouse others, you can be naked. But if you have the intent to arouse people, that's wrong. It's so wrong to turn people on. Now, if you're just a hottie or you just like ooze sexual energy or pull sexual energy like a fierce mofo, but you don't have the intent to turn people on, but you just do by existing, then what happens? How do they prove that, well, your sexual energy is so high that you're turning people on purpose, or you can't come out here because you're too sexy for this place? Too sexy for my hat. But you could be too sexy for Portland, Oregon, because you could be turning people on unintentionally, and they might think it's intentional. You know what I'm saying? Confusing. How do you qualify that? Not sure. But I'm sure that they figured out how to qualify that. Maybe masturbation in public or that sort of thing would say, well, now you're trying to turn people on. But if you just turn them on by accident because you're so hot, that's okay. The other place in the U.S. is Austin, Texas. Yep. I don't know if you knew this, but it's one of the places that is actually topless friendly in the U.S. So it's I guess there's a clothing optional park there, and it has like 100 acres. So those of you in Texas near Austin, you can go to Lake Travis's shoreline and enjoy some great nudity. I know in Ontario we have nudist resorts, but we actually have a public nude beach in Toronto on the Toronto Island, and there's actually an airport that you can get an airplane to go to the Toronto Island. So this is making it easy for all you guys and gals out there. And it's a place called Hanlon's Point. So it's a nude. I think it's clothing optional, but you can go nude there legally, again, without the intent to arouse. I had a friend that used to do naked yoga there, and I think her great skills probably turned all kinds of people on. She never got kicked out, though, for doing naked yoga. So good for her. So those are our two U.S. ones, mainly, that are Oregon and Austin. So isn't that cool? And then, so another, aside from Berlin in Germany, Munich also is pretty much made public nudity legal since 2014. So again, there's urban naked zones that you have to go to. And they're going to have you just have to kind of stumble upon them. So I don't know that there's even signs in Munich to show you where those nude areas are. In London, England, there is public nudity. They're pretty open-minded about public nudity there, surprisingly, I guess, because maybe they're less religious, and maybe Anglicans are more open than the Catholics, so something changed over the last couple hundred years as the dominant religions changed in that country. Who knows? So the nudity law there is fairly open. However, the act only becomes illegal when you intend to shock or offend others. So it's hard to know how do they qualify what people's intentions are? I don't know. So in London, there are several establishments like gyms and restaurants and even poetry readings that welcome nudists and allow being clothing optional within their premises. So isn't that kind of interesting? There are so many more. Those are like considered the top 5 in the world. So now I know you guys are going to go out and look for places to go be legal with this, and how fabulous is that? For those of you who struggle, though, with this desire to be naked in public, or even masturbate in public, or be seen being naked, my question to you is there a way you can do this that's actually legal? So let's think about a few ways that are ways that a lot of people are going and exposing themselves. I know that for me, through social media, I get a lot of like dick pics and masturbation videos. It's kind of my forte, whether it's women giving me vulva pics or men sending dick pics. It's kind of irrelevant. I get them all. And I do know that the intent is to shock, and my usual response is non-shock, so it doesn't really go anywhere. So a lot of people are using social media these days as their outlet for exhibitionism. That's one way to get away with it. I suppose, because it happens an awful lot. Another way is to make your own porn videos and put them up on like a porn hub, and then you can masturbate all you like on video and have people watch you. If you need to do it to see their face and their shock value, maybe do like a live stream connection to people, and you know what? Maybe you'll get paid for it. So I'm giving you ways to do what you want to do and make some money at it if you want, and you can still be shocking, I suppose, if you want to. And if you need to take it that extra step further, because maybe you really desire not only being nude, but you also desire being arrested for it, well, that's a whole other ball game, right? And so that kind of level of paraphilia, you got to really ask, like, you know, to me the question is, you know, how badly do I need to be seen? Where am I not seeing myself? Where do I require being seen by others? How do I require being seen by others? It kind of, I think part of this conversation also got sparked because I have a nephew who we were at like a family do, and every like minute he's like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I'm like, wow. So at one point, I was swimming in the pool with him, and he's about 5, maybe 6. And I asked him, I said, do you actually receive adequate attention at home? And I know some of you are thinking, like, that kid doesn't know what adequate means, but his response is fully energetic, and my question was that to him as well. And he said, no, I don't. I'm like, fair enough. So how, and then I actually asked him, so how much and what kind of attention do you require? And then he just swam off with a like little wedgie in his universe thinking about that. But the fun thing is, he didn't yell, look at me, another time after that. So for those of you out there who need to be seen and just desire to be seen so bad, and if you need to like flash somebody or show somebody you're good, that's cool. I see you. And if you like need to send me a pic, that's okay. If you just need me to write, I see you, I can do that for you. If it stops you from being arrested, because maybe you don't want to be arrested, I see you. Right? So I really encourage you to look at what it is that you feel like you're not being seen, that you're going to do anything, include get arrested to be seen. Okay, so that's something to play with. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today from the U.S., call 815-880-TALK. That's 815-880-8255. From Canada, dial 613-800-8736. Or you can Skype us at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. or send your questions or comments via email to info@milicajelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the Pleasure Zone, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we are talking about exhibitionism. So isn't that kind of fun? So what's fun about that is we all have a body. If you're listening, the chances are you have a body, and if you don't, that is so cool. Thank you, entities without bodies, for listening. So we've all got bodies. And then at some point, as babies, we have bodies, and those bodies are okay to be naked. In fact, not only can your body be naked as a baby, it can be naked in a change room, genitals to the world. You could run around in a park probably naked too. Most people wouldn't be bothered by that. Why? Because you're under the age of 2, and that's okay. Now, somewhere after the age of 2 or 3, when you're toilet trained, nudity becomes very wrong. All of a sudden, you have control over your genitals, and that's when your genitals become sexual. I know that sounds weird, and this is just an energetic information I'm giving you. This is not something that I've studied. This is not like Freud said, but it maybe is, and maybe does go along with that. But somewhere around the age of 2, our genitals are something that we're supposed to be able to control. We can urinate, we can take care of it, we can hold our poop and go and, hold it long enough to get to the toilet. We should have some control. And some of that control also lends to control your sexual energy. When you're a baby, you are an explosion of sexualness. Not that you are sex or that people should be having sex with you, by no means, fuck no. But you are a little bundle of joy love that came out of an orgasm. So the fact that you are like the embodiment of sexual energy is just the way that it pretty much is. You came out of an orgasm, so there you go. And so that little baby body, so many people will look at that naked baby body and go, "Oh, you're so cute, you're so beautiful, it's so wonderful, you're so cute." Then you become 2 and you're supposed to go pee on the potty by yourself, and now you are perverted for wanting to be naked. Somehow that birthday, age 2 birthday, is a pretty violent time in life. Not only do you get frack loads of vaccines if your parents force them on you, but you also get to be judged for either being potty trained by then or not being potty trained. But for God's sake, have those genitals under wraps and don't show them to the world. So there is like massive judgment that starts at some point around that age that then has us, who have been for 2 years probably getting a lot of attention and people like celebrating the nakedness that we are. Or maybe you had parents who were like, had issues and couldn't deal with your beautiful naked self. And so they couldn't deal with their own naked self, so they made your naked self wrong. And whatever, the tumbleweed of shit, you don't have to buy it. It's not their fault they were messed up. It's not your fault that you were feeling messed up. And guess what? You can change it now that you know that. And you don't have to make yourself wrong for it or anybody else. So there you go. So we look at those naked little baby bodies, bundles of joy, love, turn to be naked in public, then they're not. Then somewhere around, puberty, you start to get interested in seeing other bodies naked, whatever gender you're interested in. You're like curious about the naked body, but it's kind of taboo. Then by like 18, you were supposed to have by then probably seen a naked body and had sex with it. And then in your 20s, you're supposed to be dedicated to only one naked body for the rest of your life. There's a lot of interesting things that we place on the genitals, limitations, who your genitals can enjoy with other people's genitals and all that jazz. We know that. I've done a lot of shows on this. My question is, what the heck is it that has us stop being allowed to be naked? What is that? Where all of a sudden is one age of a body okay and another age not? And it's not necessarily puberty either. Your body's changing, developing new things, becoming so-called sexual. Why is it then? Some people have fully developed bodies and are asexual, identify that way. They do not regard their bodies as sexual things at all. And then there are other people who, like me, who have been like crazy aware of sexual energy my whole life. So this is more like a curiosity question, is like, what are you guys aware of? Like, what are you aware of that maybe it's cultural differences, maybe it's colonialism, maybe it's imposed rules, but individually, in our own families, we have choice, right? We could adapt, we could change, we could choose something different. So babies aren't arrested for being naked. If any of you know of a baby who got arrested for being naked, please correct me. I have not been aware of that. Now, at some point, you do get arrested for being naked, and what age does that start at? I believe it's 16, because then you're considered old enough to, but that's different in probably different states and different provinces as well, because it's probably related to age of consent with sex in some way, I'm guessing. So at some point, you are not allowed to be naked in public. And I don't get it. How come? So where other cultures, like we're talking about like Berlin and Munich and London and all these places where nudity is okay, how is it that it's okay for them but not for the rest of the world? So what values do they have that we don't have? And in those places, how often are people even doing the act of exhibitionism as a paraphilia, that is to shock somebody or to arouse them purposefully without their consent or without their desire to receive that, kind of as a way to be cruel, I suppose. So there can be nudity with like a kindness of like appreciation of the body, and then there's a nudity of I'm putting this in your face as kind of a form of abuse. Now, anything that's non-consensual to me is, I get it, like that's not cool. If you live in an area, if you're living in like Berlin or Munich and you know about these nudity laws and you're offended, it's your choice to live there. And it's, the people who are being naked, it's your choice to look at them. So there's still some consent. It's public. You can walk away if you want. Now, if they were to stick their genitals in your face and, try and like masturbate on you without your consent, then yeah, that's not cool. So I think that we have such an intense and incredible desire to be seen that we do have things like pornography on the rise, and we do have like dick pics going out like freaking crazy because people just want to be freaking seen. And the next time you see a friend of yours or a lover of yours or even the children in your life, just say, I see you. See you. Because you know what? That in itself might be all it takes to keep somebody out of jail, or to have to abuse somebody so that they can get their jollies off because they just so desperately want to be seen that they're forcing it on other people without their consent. Yeah, so, I see you. How fun is that? Just I see you. Hi, I see you. Now, when you hear that, do you actually feel a little bit more relaxed? Do you still feel that urge to just like, put your dick in my face? Like, do you still have that urge? And that's cool if you do, because maybe we have like some energetic connection going on that's kind of sexy, and that's cool. Whatever. Do what you need to do, but maybe not personally. But if you want to fantasize about it, go, by all means, have your fantasies. Nobody can arrest you for your thoughts yet, so just don't get any chips from Microsoft or anything like that, just saying. So I think, as long as we can have freedom of thought, you can fantasize about whatever you like, including me if you want, and I'm cool with that. And think about what what you're actually gaining by the thought of, or by the act itself of going out and shocking people or harming them even. Like, are you that unkind? And if you are, that's just a matter of fact, because that's just who you are. Like, if you just want to hurt people, that's who you are. Maybe you're a sociopath, maybe you're a psychopath, and that's not going to change. But if you truly are kind and you still have an exhibitionist thing going on, there's lots of ways to pull it off. And I think becoming a stripper is a great way. Creating your own porn, getting nude pictures out there to the world. All of those definitely ask for money for these, though. Get some money off of this. So exhibitionism is in a lot of different places and has been for a very long time, even when you look at art and you look at depictions of naked bodies throughout time. And some of those things, yes, they were art, but there is a level of exhibitionism going on with those as well, that both the artist is showing their side to be shocking, and that the people who are in the paintings, who are the models, they get to be shocking. They get to be naked publicly, essentially, in front of rooms of people, whether they're recognizable or not. Anyway, those are some of my thoughts on exhibitionism, and I have a few more. So you're listening to The Pleasure Zone here on Inspired Choices Network, and we'll be right back after this commercial.
Are you secretly a voyeur, wondering what's going on in other people's sex lives? What if now is the time for a totally different sexual evolution? Are you interested in people who are pioneers of different sexual and pleasurable practices? Lean in now with Milica Jelenic, where she will entice you and your body to know your own pleasure zone. On the Pleasure Zone radio show with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic, you'll receive tools, inspiration, and a foundation to allow yourself to receive more in your sex life, and quite possibly other areas of your life as well. Listen for the Pleasure Zone with Milica every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Mountain Time, and 5 p.m. Pacific Time on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com.
Interested in masturbating for money, copulating for consciousness, and pleasuring on purpose? 21 Days of Sexual Magicism with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic is an exploration of tools, processes, and actions that you can use to create more for your life, your body, your money inflows, and so much more. Graduated learning for all levels of interest. Learn at your own pace via video classes or join the yearly live class. Take a peek at www.milicajelenic.com.
This is the Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. To participate in the program today from the U.S., call 815-880-TALK. That's 815-880-8255. From Canada, dial 613-800-8736. Or you can Skype us at InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. Or send your questions or comments via email to info@MilicaJelenic.com. Now, back to the program.
Welcome back to the Pleasure Zone, my sweet, sweet pleasure seekers. Tonight we're talking about exhibitionism. And just before I got on to do my show, I was watching a program on CBC, which is a Canadian network, and they have an online thing called GEM, where you can watch all these shows from the past. And one of them was the Winnipeg Comedy Festival had an episode about. I think the episode was actually supposed to be about neighbors or something, but the story of it is there's a fellow, he's a dad, and he said he was talking about breastfeeding, and he said, I don't understand why all these women are getting in trouble and getting arrested or being told by security guards they need to cover up, stop breastfeeding in public. By the way, it's legal in Canada. It's particularly legal in Ontario, and it's actually legal in Toronto, where he was talking about this, for women to go topless. There is a bylaw that got passed. Not a lot of people follow it, but it is legal to be topless in Toronto. So at the time, anyway, he was at the mall and he was saying that there was a woman breastfeeding, and he saw this mall cop come over and ask her to cover up. He's like, what the heck? He's like, I don't get it. There's a woman sitting there nurturing, feeding her child, and because it arouses some person, probably a heterosexual man, that this woman has to cover up her breasts. He's like, okay, so if we reverse that story, and you get a mom nurturing a child, he's like, okay, so he's like, I'm a pretty good dad. He's like, so if I go to the mall and I'm being kind and nurturing my kids and holding their hands and guiding them and talking to them, and that turns women on, because a lot of women get turned on by really good parenting, and they get turned on by other things like kindnesses, like the laundry and things like that. Not always, but sometimes. So let's just say a whole bunch of women get aroused by seeing a really good dad. He said, so if a whole bunch of women did get aroused by me, what, should they throw a giant blanket over me? Because I'm arousing people by my parenting? And I was like, that is the finest example of how insane it is, because yes, it's a breast. It's absolutely, because it's a breast, it turns on men, and it's obvious because it's a body part, so that's illegal. But a guy holding his kid's hands and being a good dad, absolutely, that would arouse me. So, good laughs, because apparently these acts of exhibitionism only count if you are shocking somebody or arousing them. Now, my show shocks a lot of people, so luckily I haven't been arrested. But I've been told by several people that I say shocking things. Shock jocks that are out there as well. They're saying shocking things all the time. It's a little bit on the edge of exhibitionism, right? We're not getting arrested. But there are people out there who, because they're showing off their genitals and somebody got shocked or aroused, now it's a problem. I actually remember being I think I was about 10 years old, and I was at a mall with a friend of mine and her mom and her brother, and we were getting into the car, and it was late at night, dark. The mall was probably closing. It was maybe 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Getting into the car, and as the headlights turned on, the headlights focused on a man who was masturbating in between two cars. And I didn't know what I was seeing at first because I was sitting in the back seat. But the mom and my friend, and I'm like a kid. I'm like maybe between 10 and 12. I really don't think I was older than that. And they are just like disgusted and like laughing and disgusted and mad, like all these emotions, like 45 emotions in 2 minutes just shows up. And I'm sitting in the back, and I'm more curious. I'm like, I want to actually see closer what's going on and what is this guy doing. I wasn't shocked. I was actually curious. I'm like, I don't really understand what's happening here. I don't have a lot of experience with this, but I'm certainly curious and wonder more. I do get that some people get highly offended, shocked, or feel disgusted by it. I think people try to shock me a lot, but I'm like, I'm one of those very curious people, and I will probably lean in and try and check it out more. I might out-weirdo you, so I don't know, shock me if you like, but I'm probably going to out-weirdo you. So nice try. So that was my experience with an exhibitionist in public, which is funny because truly, like, some of my deepest, darkest, most pleasurable fantasies are fulfilled through masturbation, but it also has to do with masturbation in public. And I have not actually masturbated per se in public, although technically I guess masturbating in a car once, that does count. But that's a whole other story. And I won't talk about that in case anybody ever like finds evidence that I did that. That would be cool. So, well, good times. Getting it out in public, getting it all exposed, getting the truth exposed, or maybe not the truth. Who knows? This is all a giant query and giant like wonder. So stay tuned in and turned on until next week, and voyeurism.
Thank you for listening to The Pleasure Zone with sensual movement artist Milica Jelenic. The Pleasure Zone returns next Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central, 6 p.m. Mountain, and 5 p.m. Pacific on InspiredChoicesNetwork.com. We hope you'll join us. Until then, have the best week of your life by choosing to be turned on and tuned in to your body.